everyone. My name is Carmelo Rizzari, and I am the president of SIOP Europe. Thank you for tuning in to our special webinar organized by SIOP Europe in partnership with the Childhood Cancer International Europe, CCI Europe, on the occasion of the European Week Against Cancer. SIOP Europe represents all healthcare professionals and the researchers working in the field of childhood cancer across Europe. Anita.
Hi, everyone. My name is Anita Kienesberger, and I am CCI Europe Committee Chair. And CCI Europe stands for and represents for patients, parents, and their whole family in the field of childhood cancer across Europe. Our patient community is really delighted to co-host this webinar together with SIOP, which will be focused on how we can ensure European initiatives deliver for children and young people with cancer. Carmelo.
Yeah, thank you, Anita. I'm very happy to tell you that we will have today two expert speakers followed by question and answer session where all of you will have a chance to intervene. On behalf of CCI Europe, the speaker is Delphine Heenen, CCI Europe committee member and the European Affairs lead. Anita.
Yeah, and on behalf of SIOP Europe, the speaker will be for this webinar, Gilles Vassal. He is SIOP Europe board member and the policy lead. With this, I want to hand over to Gilles Vassal.
Good morning, everyone. Happy to have you with us today for a very special webinar to go through what Europe is proposing for children and adolescents with cancer. Before we get started, just a few housekeeping information. There will be a Q&A session at the end of the webinar, and you will be using the chat, as you know, and you did already, to ask your question, to ask for the floor. But you will receive also in the chat the Slido link, because we will need also you answering questions during the webinar. So we can move on the next slide. This is a Slido link. So you have two options. The first one, that you scan the QR code on your screen, or you go into the chat and Dayan will share with you the link to the Slido. And if you can do so right now, you can start answering the first question. What stakeholder are you representing today? So logically, we will see on the screen, here you are. Are you from healthcare professional academia? Are you from parent, patient, survivors? Are you from industry? Are you from policymakers or from other stakeholders? And we are really welcoming all of you. And as you can see up on the right inside, on the up and right inside, I think the right thing is a number of you already answered. So we'll keep moving and so on. Please don't be shy. It's completely anonymous. We don't know who you are, but we are very pleased to have you here today with us. Okay. A few more? Very good. So most half of you are healthcare professional, and healthcare professional means everyone taking care of patients, industry, nurses, pediatric oncologists, medicine, and so on. 20% from parents, patients, and survivors community. And we are 13% of other. Really welcome all of you. Thank you very much, Marco. Now we can get started. And we'll start in 2015, when SIOP Europe launched the European Cancer Plan for Children and Adolescents with Cancer. And the three objectives were very clear: cure more children, cure them better, and tackle inequalities across Europe. And this European Cancer Plan has been updated last year. And you know that since 2020, in Europe, there have been many initiatives, many programs and measures that have been set up in the field of cancer. When in parallel, Europe was fighting pandemia, clearly setting up the first ever large program on cancer in Europe. And we would like today to go all through these initiatives to figure out how this really achieve these overarching goals: cure more, cure better, and tackle inequalities for children and adolescents with cancer in Europe. On the next slide, how we can do so. First, by elucidating the role of the immune system and epigenetics for therapeutic intervention. These are very much advanced in adults, but not sufficiently explored in children. And these are avenues of really new effective therapeutic interventions. We need to have a systematic use of all available research and healthcare data, really to serve what is on the next slide, which is developing artificial intelligence for diagnosis and treatment, better diagnosis and better treatment. Developing and introducing effective and less toxic innovative therapies in standard care to cure children and adolescents that current standard treatment are not really helping in terms of curing. But also ensuring equal access across Europe to innovation and to standard treatment across Europe, which will be a way to tackle inequalities. It's not only about new treatments and new diagnoses, it's also understanding better the causes of childhood cancer. For prevention strategies, you know that at the moment we don't have prevention strategy, and we need to continue to better understand pediatric malignancies to be able to design the best treatment forward. And also to prevent long-term morbidity and death. We know that more than 300,000 European citizens are childhood cancer survivors, and the quality of their life, being survivor of childhood cancer, is absolutely essential to really cure more and cure better all children and adolescents with cancer, while tackling inequalities. All these 7 objectives are intertwined, interrelated, and work within together. And they will be implemented not only by the medical sector, the health professional, not only through using e-health, not only with patient advocates and non-governmental organizations, but also with basic scientists, with the digital sector, with biopharmaceutical industry, and social and human sciences experts. It is necessarily a multi-stakeholder endeavor. And this is what we proposed in 2019, published in Lancet Oncology, what we called a European Pediatric Cancer Mission. Would it be an aspiration or a reality? And the question is, with all what Europe is setting up and developing in the next 10 years, will it be a reality? So the first topic is access to the best care for all. And I would like to give the floor to Delphine. Hello, Delphine. Would you please address the issue of care for all in the current European landscape for children and adolescents with cancer?
Indeed, what you magnificently demonstrate is that we need to have a strategy to improve treatment, but we need to have the right policies in place. So the next slide will show us the first European initiative that is currently being developed and that could really help patients is the best European care strategy. How can we really improve treatment everywhere in Europe? And that's an overarching strategy. It's not cancer specific, but it's very important that we make sure that it doesn't come in contradiction with other strategies that are cancer specific. And on the next slide, we will see that the European Reference Network on Pediatric Cancer is one of those very specific strategies that are very important. And one of the things that is fantastic about it is it helps patients getting access to the best specialists across Europe, whichever member state they come from. It means that there are virtual tumor boards where the best experts can talk about pediatric cancer patients, specifically have access to all the clinical information about them. But what we see is that we really need to reinforce them and make sure that they are part of a real reinforcement strategy at the level of the member states, and that they are truly invested in because they need to be better financed. The third initiative is cross-border healthcare. So European reference network in principle allow patients to have access to the best care and the best strategies without traveling. But sometimes some interventions require specialists or dedicated drugs that cannot be administered or performed locally. And so patients need to travel. And that's where we bump into what we call in the jargon, the famous S2 form. And the S2 form is not as easy to get in every single country. And recently, the European Commission assessed the implementation of the cross-border healthcare directive, and we saw that it wasn't equally implemented in all member states. We need to make sure that patients can travel seamlessly, that the administrative hurdles be lowered, but we also need to make sure that patients can travel for care, but also for clinical trial, because in the setting of life-threatening rare diseases like pediatric cancer, clinical trials are sometimes part of the treatment, and that aspect needs to be taken into account in the new version and that will be adopted by the European authorities. And then, of course, you cannot deny that when a child gets seriously ill, it has an impact on the whole family, and that parents need to take measures to look after their child. And it cannot be denied that hospitals work the way they do today because parents stop working and attend to their child by the hospital bed in the hospitals. And that's only possible if there are proper policies in every single member state to make sure that those parents can take time off from work to look after their child. And we're really counting on the European Union to set standards that can be copied and implemented in every single member state, because we don't want to add to the toxicity of chemo, the financial toxicity of cancer. And then as an overarching policy, the European strategy on the right of the child, in that strategy, you have policies making sure that work-life balance is properly implemented, that patients get access to the best care. And so that comes back as a loophole to the European reference network and cross-border healthcare directive. So all these initiatives need to be approached coherently, strategically, to make sure that there are no contradictions. And then for research and data, I will hand it over to Gilles Vassal.
Thank you, Delphine. On the next slide, understanding cancer requires a new level of investment in innovative research, including high potential and high risk projects. The European-wide platform, UNCAN.eu, UNCAN for Understand Cancer, will utilize existing relevant research infrastructures and invest in the development of new models and new technologies, an essential tool to improve understanding of cancer with all researchers across Europe. This platform will include the needs of childhood cancers, and SIOP Europe, CCI Europe are part of a project to prepare the UNCAN.eu that will start in September. On the next slide, the European health data space is a very ambitious but essential regulation that will build a health-specific data sharing framework in Europe. What does it mean? It means clear rules, common standards, practices, infrastructures, governance for the use of electronic health data by patients and for research, but not only for research, for innovation, for policy making, for patient safety, for statistics and regulatory purposes. A regulation which is essential to build the capacity of data across Europe. Among this is the European Cancer Information System. The European Cancer Information System, I will not pronounce ECIS, well, I did, will support and harmonize all cancer registries across Europe and will produce meaningful epidemiological information. What does it mean? In pediatric oncology, we will know how many cases of pediatric malignancies per disease, per country, and per year. which means all the numbers that we need to monitor the progress that all actions together will drive to the overarching goal. Above this, in addition, is the European Cancer Patient Digital Center. This is the data home for cancer patients in Europe. It is about information, patient-reported outcomes, access to data, in a nutshell, empowering patient and survivor. Will be really the home of cancer patients in Europe, really accessing all the information and all the data for improving diagnostic and treatment through the use of data. Of course, above this is the General Data Protection Regulation. And we know how this regulation protects each of us and our privacy. But we also know that there's a huge heterogeneity in the interpretation and the implementation of this regulation across member states. And it is slowing down research, especially in pediatric oncology. And clearly there is a need for improved guidelines to facilitate the exchange of data and the implementation of this research across Europe. So working together and sharing is absolutely essential to achieve our goal. Finally, the European Cancer Inequalities Registries will monitor the disparities and report on trends in key cancer prevention and care at the regional, the national, and the EU level. A cancer profile will be set up and updated for each member state, and this will include and describe disparities in childhood cancer care, and this will help monitoring the progress towards our goal. And you see that clearly in terms of research and data, data is a really extremely important part of what will be done in the next year through all these measures to facilitate a Europe really ready to use data for the sake of children and adolescents with cancer, but not only, all cancer patients. Back to you, Delphine. How to improve access to medicines?
Well, thank you, Gilles. Well, first of all, the first thing that you need to do to improve access to medicines, and that's what the next slide is all about, is actually having drugs that are appropriate for children with cancer. And that's what the initiative on the EU Paediatric Medicines Regulation and the Orphan Drug Regulation is all about. The Orphan Drug Regulation is about developing drugs specifically for rare types of diseases, and that's what pediatric cancers are. They are all orphan diseases. But what we've seen so far is that the Orphan Drug Regulation fostered a lot of innovation in the field of cancer, but mostly for adult cancer. And we didn't manage to steer it towards the pediatric oncology field. And then there is the Pediatric Medicines Regulation, I'm still on the same initiative. And this initiative is really about translating existing drugs, cancer drugs, for the benefits of pediatric patients with cancer. And that's really key, because today, if the name of the disease is different in the adult world and in the pediatric world, there is no mandate, no obligation to make a pediatric investigation plan and to test the drug in the clinical space for patients with cancer. So what we want is a clear amendment of the Pediatric Medicines Regulation to include the concept of mechanism of action of the drugs that will make it possible to mandate the PIP, a pediatric investigation plan, for a breast cancer drug to a neuroblastoma patient. And that's really important, because my first contact with the world of innovation for cancer was actually realizing that my son would be treated with all drugs that are off-label. We need those drugs to be developed on label for kids with cancer. On the next slide, a very important aspect also is making sure that those drugs are accessible for patients. And in most cases, it means that they need to be reimbursed. Today, we're faced with a situation where a new drug is being approved by the European Medicines Agency, but it takes quite some time to have it approved at a national level and reimbursed. And why is that? It's because we have a problem with the health technology assessment. What is health technology assessment? It's the assessment of new drugs for them to be reimbursed. So in every single country, there is a national authority overseeing whether drugs should be reimbursed or not by the Social Security. And the problem is it's not coordinated, but this regulation, which has been in place for a few years, is actually trying to sort this out. And by 2025, we have high hopes that the standards for the assessment of drug prior to the reimbursement will be harmonized and standardized so that they can be quickly reimbursed after approval by the European Medicines Agency. And if our next initiative is also about access, the general pharmaceutical legislation is tackling many aspects that are also very important. We're hearing now and then, really often in the papers, about those fantastic new drugs that are not payable by people, but also by the states because they're very expensive. So ensuring accessibility and affordability of medicines is very important, and we need to have transparency rules ensuring that the price setting for new drugs is fair for everyone. Another aspect that's also very important when we want to improve access to medicines is reducing shortages. One of them, in most cases, drugs were not available for young patients because they were missing. We couldn't have access to them. So sorting out the problematic of shortages is also key to a great success to improve access to the best standard of care for children and adolescents with cancer. And next slide. So with all these initiatives that Gilles and I have been describing, and I think that everyone's hopes are quite high, how likely do you think that those initiatives can really contribute to improve diagnosis and treatment and care for young patients and with cancer? Is that going to help them cure more and cure better? Please click on the link or go on Slido with a QR code and answer our quick survey to give us your impression so far.
So thank you, Delphine. That is the time you all answer very rapidly. You are absolutely great. Go to Slido, in the link, in the chat, the QR code no longer on screen, and please vote. Yes, this is the interactive part of this webinar. Okay, 2/3 of you said likely. 27% don't know, unlikely for 15%. Some more? Okay. So maybe something was missing in what we shared, Delphine. What about survivors?
Well, indeed, if we go back to the presentation, a major aspect to improve treatment, care, and quality of life for patients is to make sure that survivors are properly considered as well, and that we look after their interests too. And there are three initiatives in this respect that are really key and could really help. First of all, in Europe's Beating Cancer Plan, we have the EU network of youth cancer survivors. And this network is really about connecting survivors, carers, and young people and their families to make sure that all initiatives are discussed among all of them. And the purpose is to leverage existing networks to improve the way we consider survivors, and we help them go through the transition from sick person back to a healthy lifestyle, or a healthy life, not lifestyle. I'm sorry for the confusion. On the next slide, we also have a very important initiative, which is the Cancer Survivor Smart Card. It's a follow-up of the passport. It's really key because what we see is that 2/3 of survivors will suffer from long-term side effects caused by their treatment. And for half of those patients who suffer from long-term side effects, it will impact their daily life. So they cannot deny it. But it's still important that we help those patients taking over from the transitioning from the life as a sick person with cancer to a healthy life, where you actually prevent, monitor, and make sure that every single long-term side effect is properly followed up. And the smart card and the survivorship passports are there to do that, to help them communicate with healthcare professionals to avoid repeating their story of cancer over and over. And then finally, we have a very important aspect, which is going back to a normal life with normal rights like everyone else. And that's where the right to be forgotten kicks in. I don't know if you all realize, but cancer survivors, and like everyone else, when they want to buy a house, contract insurance, they need to talk about their health past. And that means mentioning the fact that they had cancer. And in many countries, it means that they are barred from the easy thing that everyone wants to have is buy a house or get health insurance. And the right to be forgotten is all about making sure that whatever happened in the past can be forgotten after sometimes. And in some countries, it is a reality. It is a reality in France, in Luxembourg, in Portugal, in Belgium. I think it's about to be a reality in Romania. Other countries are on their way to also implementing it, but we want every single survivor to benefit from the right to be forgotten. And Europe has to show the way and actually offer guidelines to member states to make sure that each member state implements that in its legislative tools. With all of this, I think I've walked you through quite a lot of initiatives, and maybe a small refresher is useful. So we have Europe's Beating Cancer Plan, an overarching. We have the pharmaceutical strategy, also overarching. We have Horizon Europe missions with a cancer mission, which will finance many of the policies and research. We have ECIS, the European, sorry, I always forget this acronym.
Cancer Information System.
Thank you, Gilles. We have the general GDPR, General Data Protection Regulation. We have the smart card for the survivors. We have the European care strategy. We have the health technology assessment regulation. We have the European reference network. We have cross-border healthcare to help patients travel. We have the EU network of youth cancer survivors. We have the cancer inequalities registries. We have the work-life balance directive. We have the rights of the child. And finally, we have European health data space. And that's quite a lot. So what do you think we might miss if everything is just sent out in the wild without proper, maybe what we're looking is for coordination. So with this being said, we really place very high hopes in all the initiatives, and we're very thankful towards the European Union for everything is being put in place for our community. But what could happen if we don't have proper coordination? And that's really where we want to ask you again, your contribution. So if you have time to fill in the Slido and give us, you know, a few words of what you fear, of what you think could happen if we don't have the right missing link between all these initiatives.
So please go to Slido for the last time. And this time you don't vote, but you put your thoughts, 1 word, 2 words. What would happen if there would not be any coordination of all these measures, programs, initiative across Europe for childhood cancer? And as you see, the cloud is up and running just to show what you feel in terms of the need of coordination, chaos, inefficiency, no improvement, no progress, fragmentation. step backwards. Things remain like it is. Stagnation.
I think we also have inequality and inequalities that are, you know, spelled differently, but should be bigger, probably.
Yeah. So Delphine, it looks like clearly the need for coordination is important, isn't it?
I would quite agree with you, Gilles.
Okay, so as a conclusion, chaos is a very strong message. So we need really to figure out how to best coordinate all these measures. Thank you very much for your input. And now we move to the last part, how this could be coordinated. In the European Beating Cancer Plan, a stakeholder contact group has been created. And last fall, a thematic group on childhood cancers has been set up. And this will really serve as a stakeholder contact group for measures within the European Beating Cancer Plan. But as you see, not only the European Beating Cancer Plan is really there to help addressing the objective, cure more, cure better, and tackle inequalities. And this is why we propose that a European Childhood Cancer Advisory Board could really help in this setting. Would it be what it would do? It would support the coordination of across actions, across all relevant EU initiatives that we went through. It will foster a comprehensive, inclusive approach. It will avoid the risk of fragmentation and will accelerate the advance toward the goal, the overarching objective that I repeated several times in this webinar. And this would be multi-stakeholder, because clearly we need everyone around the table to work together in order really to achieve the goal. And in addition, it would facilitate and improve the connection of stakeholders to achieve the synergies needed for the implementation, advise on unmet needs, ensure the continuity with existing European networks and collaborative groups, and mobilize patients, parents, and survivors organizations, really to mobilize the entire community and all the stakeholders toward the goal, cure more, cure better, and tackle inequalities. And this proposal has been supported by one of the articles of the BICA, Beating Cancer Plan resolution, that was voted by the European Parliament earlier this year. And the BICA called for the creation of a European level advisory group of stakeholders for a goal-driven and coherent implementation of relevant actions across the plan, Horizon Europe, and other health program initiatives. And in addition, earlier on this year, the Council, through the presidency of France, with a trio, France, Czech Republic, and Sweden, really identify in the political declaration on February 4, the Day of Cancer around the world, that whether the need for an effective mechanism to enable transparent coordination and implementation of the action and project relevant to children and adolescents with cancer. So clearly, there is a momentum, a kind of really common understanding of the needs, really to make all these measures that can deliver on the agenda, really deliver on the agenda. So having said that, we would like very much to thank you all for your attendance. Thank you, Delphine. And maybe we can move to the Q&A discussion. What do you think, Delphine?
I think it's time to move to the Q&A discussion. And I really think that if you have questions, it would be worthwhile putting them in the chat. It will help.
And maybe what we could start with John Ryan. We are extremely privileged and honored that John Ryan, the Director of Public Health at DG Santé, really attended this webinar. I would like very much to ask him whether he would like to make some comments, some suggestion on all what we said. John, are you with us? You have the floor. Okay, maybe waiting for that, can we start looking at the question from the audience? Okay, there has been many questions. Ooh.
John Ryan is connecting.
John. Good morning, John. Thank you very much for being with us.
No, it's a pleasure and really great meeting so far. I apologize, but I was stuck in the attendees room. I wasn't a panelist, so that's why I couldn't.
So sorry.
No, it's no
sorry
problem.
for
No,
that.
it's no problem. These are the adventures of Zoom, you know.
Yeah.
So I was really impressed with the meeting so far for the simple reason that your organization is one of the few organizations, I think, which has a very holistic overall view of the situation. I was really quite impressed with your overview that you gave during the first few slides, because many organizations, they just focus on one thing without seeing the bigger picture. But I think in the presentation, it was quite clear that you've understood that there are many different policy levers which can be used to influence the issue of childhood cancer. And you mentioned all sorts of topics which I don't normally hear from stakeholder groups. For example, the issue of work-life balance, the issue of the cross-border directive and the reform of the cross-border directive, together with the European reference networks, of course, which are part of that system, but also the specific forms which need to be filled in, because we're in Europe, you know, so we have to have forms for everything. And there was a reference made to the difficulties of getting these forms in the context of transfer of patients and so on. You also talked about health technology assessment and the link with reimbursement. You talked about digital health and access to documents and so on, access to digital documents. And of course, the orphan and pediatric medicines regulation. So you, I think, have seen that, you know, the cancer plan is one thing, but there are many aspects to how we need to make progress on a number of fields before the situation of children with cancer will improve in practice. I must say the survey which you did was a little bit depressing, because I heard all the words, the keywords that you were reading out, like frustrated, awful, terrible. And I since I couldn't see the survey, I wasn't sure whether you were inventing these words or whether it was something that comments were coming in through participants.
No, that's what the audience sharing their thoughts.
Okay, well, it's good to have a reality check anyway, so I fully appreciate that. And very often
they also mentioned that they thought the measures were very effective to deliver. So I think that the message is really that they are keen to have to see those measures coordinated to ensure their efficiency. Yeah.
No, I can appreciate that. And I appreciate that within the Commission, it's often difficult to know what's going on because we have so many different departments doing different things. I had an example of this yesterday where we were discussing the right to be forgotten, you know, in the context of the cancer plan. And there are so many different angles involved in terms of consumer rights, insurance directives, financial services directives, and the problems that patients have on the ground in getting a mortgage or getting a bank loan when they've had formerly had a cancer diagnosis. There's a huge difference between the patient experience, the lived patient experience, the practical experience of a patient looking for a loan, and these high-level discussions on financial regulations. So I completely understand your position that people on the ground with a child or treating a child with cancer may consider this completely, the things we're doing are completely removed from reality. But in fact, I think the key point is that many of these policy initiatives can contribute directly or indirectly to improving the treatment and prevention of childhood cancer. So I think your presentation this morning was probably a very good oversight, but it's clearly important that we do this on a continuous basis so that we make sure that organizations like yourself are fully involved when legislation is being reviewed. And yesterday I signed the impact assessment document for the Orphan Drugs and Pediatric Medicines Directive, because we're reforming this legislation at the moment. And I just hope that your organization, for example, was fully involved and fully commenting during the stakeholder consultation on the reform of the legislation. Of course, we can probably do better, we can probably go further, but it's really important that organizations like your own have their voice at the right moment when legislation is being reviewed. If I might turn to one issue which I didn't hear mentioned so far, but maybe I wasn't listening properly, was the issue of the cancer mission in DG Research. Now, the cancer plan has a budget of 4 billion over 7 years, and we have a number of initiatives which are planned there, going far beyond childhood cancer, of course, covering a whole series of different topics. But similarly, on the research side, there is also the cancer mission, and I'd like to make sure that this is also on your radar, because there are many projects being rolled out and developed also on the pharmaceutical side, which might be of interest to you there. So one of the topics which you mentioned, Gilles, at the end was the issue of governance and how to ensure that the voice of childhood cancer and pediatric oncology was correctly reflected in the implementation work. Now, we have, as you mentioned, set up 2 groups. We have a group of member states dealing with pediatric issues, and we have a group of stakeholders dealing with pediatric issues. And I must say that neither group have met so far. Neither group have met so far, because basically we're calling these groups together when they have something specific to discuss. So you might say, well, why are we keeping everybody waiting? Why don't we call the groups together immediately? The issue is that we have a number of initiatives which are ongoing, like helping children with cancer initiative. We have the Cancer Survivor Smart Card. We have the network of youth cancer survivors. But we have not set up this stakeholder group yet. And I think one of the issues we could discuss is when this meeting would take place and what would be the type of agenda points you'd like to see there. Because since we have the group, it's already been set up. We've invited membership. We have a similar group with member states. I'd like to try and keep this structure if I could, even though I take note of what you were saying about the idea of having a cancer board, children's cancer board. I think that would be something that would be outside the cancer plan structure. It might have advantages, but it could also have disadvantages. So I just ask you to reflect a little bit on this as to whether you want to have an ovni flying around outside the cancer plan, or whether you want something in the cancer plan which would be linked with the other parts of the plan. So that's a discussion point. I don't want to give the answer today, yes or no, but I'm just saying we have a group for member states, we have a group for stakeholders in the area of pediatric cancer. Could we not, as a first step, at least establish these meetings and set them up and discuss what we need to do there?
Well, thank you very much, John, for this. Really, thank you for sharing. And the fact that the 2 groups will be set up very soon is very reassuring. But the question is, will these groups work beyond the Beating Cancer Plan? The message we try to share today, well, that clearly the Beating Cancer Plan, the Cancer Mission are really great with specific measures, but there are many other initiatives that are absolutely essential. And you mentioned that we are not focusing on only cancer patients, but on several items, the ICA regulation and so on. So we believe that all these measures, not only the one in the Beating Cancer Plan, are needed to achieve the goal. And the question is, will these groups have their scope beyond, or would it be somewhere across the DGs, across all the initiatives, to have a kind of coordination, we said, to really make sure that all these actions really work together to achieve the goal? That was
I understand your question.
With everyone. Yep.
I understand your question, and the cancer plan is not limited to activities of the health department and the commission.
Okay.
most of the elements in the cancer plan come from outside the health department. So there are a whole series of initiatives which refer to pediatrics, to pediatric drugs, to cross-border directives, digital health, to health technology assessment. All of these issues are mentioned in the cancer plan. I think myself that if you set up a structure that's outside, that's an ad hoc structure which is established outside the cancer plan, you lose a certain amount of the connection with the cancer plan. So, I mean, the cancer plan was designed to bring in elements and initiatives and policy agendas that are not traditionally public health. I mean, that go far beyond the prevention and health promotion agenda, which we normally have. And they include issues around pharmaceuticals, for example, the organization of health services, the European reference networks, digital health, all those sorts of things, which are the subject of separate legislative initiatives at the moment, as you know. So my feeling is that if you set up something completely separate from the cancer plan as a childhood cancer board or something, first of all, who's going to decide the membership? Are you going to have member states on board? Is it just going to be a group of NGOs or health professionals or whatever? What is your legitimacy for speaking in that group? And who are you going to give the messages to, in fact? So my feeling is, from a government's point of view, it makes sense to be inside the machine, inside the cancer plan, but making this point that you want to know what are the linkages with the pharma legislation. You want to know what are the linkages with health technology assessment. You can put all these points on the agenda of your meetings, and we can bring in our colleagues to speak. And that's part of the cancer initiative, which would give you, I think, a much stronger voice than if you are somehow operating on the outside and just sort of making statements on this subject or that subject. So my professional advice will be to try and find a way of making the stakeholder group work in the way you want it to work, and having your voice within that structure, because then your voice would be heard, I think, and we could actually support that process.
Thank you very much, John. We are not proposing to have a kind of electron libre ovni that would be detached. We want really to support and help all together what the Commission, what Europe is willing to do. Thank you so much for your contribution. Really, really appreciate it. I think in the last 10 minutes, we should address a few questions from the audience. And I saw that Andrea Biondi raised his hand a little while ago. Andrea, are you with us? Can you switch on your camera so we can see you?
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Delphine and Gilles. Great presentation. And as I said in my chat, great opportunity and momentum for pediatric oncology in Europe. No doubt about that. But my suggestion is that we definitely do need, and this of course is a request to the board, that it is extremely important to open a discussion on how to strengthen the link with the ECTG and the NAFOS and SIOP, because in my opinion, care, cure, and research are currently delivered through these frames. And I personally believe that if you don't want to leave SIOP as a fantastic voice and desk of the great opportunities that we do have, we need definitely to rethink on how this relationship should be strengthened. And this is absolutely important as a future for try to get benefit of the current opportunities by the EU. And of course, in that context, for example, the definition who is going to elect and nominate the EU advisory board for what has been mentioned is of course an essential step of transparency, but I think even to strengthen what I said before. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrea. I think we had also Sarah Roman Galdron, who raised her hand. Sarah? You can switch on your camera if you wish as well.
Sorry, it was by mistake that I raised my hand. I apologize.
Okay, no problem. Do you want to say something? If not, that's okay. So to the point by Andrea, clearly, as you saw, we didn't came with a proposal, who would be in, how would be the election and so on. We wanted to raise the question, how to best coordinate all this. John, you want to make a comment? I see you on screen as well. No? Yeah? No? Okay. Okay, let's move to another question in the chat, but there are many questions. I need the help of the office for picking up, because I didn't see all the questions that.
Well, one of the questions maybe could be addressed to Mr. John Ryan. One of the questions was, will all these initiatives translate into specific multi-country participating projects? That's a question from Mihaela Bukurenzi.
So how member states are really committed to implement all this?
Yeah, I'll come back on this point maybe. I think it's an important point. So the founding principle of the cancer plan was not to improve the situation of the 5% at the top of the pyramid. When we were talking about drafting the cancer plan, our whole idea was, how do we move the people who are at the bottom of the pyramid slightly higher, or even substantially higher over the period of the plan, hopefully. So, but the problem always is with these European projects that you tend to attract the best performers in the class who say, oh yes, well, you know, they're in a position to contribute to projects because they're already active in that area. The whole trick is really to try and develop and implement projects which are attractive and which countries which are low resource countries are capable of participating in. And that's a much more tricky operation. The spending of money for the health program and also for the research program to a lesser extent is conditional on the number of countries that are involved. And we're really trying to engage with the member states before we launch these projects through the steering group, which we have. You know, we have a member state group which meets twice, 3 times a month. And they're actually helping us to design the projects in a way that's interesting for them. And I hope that you will be able to see over time that these joint actions which are introduced, or the activities which are done by the Joint Research Centre on knowledge centres or on registries or on guidelines for screening, for example, we really try and make sure that the countries who are worst off in terms of performance or treatment delays and so on, that these are the ones which get the most attention from our side. So we're making an effort really to turn the whole thing around and to address the countries where the gaps are greatest. And you mentioned as well, I think Gilles or one of your colleagues, the Inequalities Registry.
Yes.
The Inequalities Registry is extremely difficult to operate, but we already have a first version which is public. We'd really be happy for your feedback on that. But the whole idea is to really identify where there are problems, where there are gaps, where there are difficulties, where there are long delays in treatment, so that we can channel investment into those areas, into those countries. If there are workforce problems, if there are problems of infrastructure, if there are problems of organization, we're prepared to invest. We don't only have the health program, the research program, we have a huge opportunity at the moment with the Resilience and Recovery Fund. The Resilience and Recovery Fund, and there have been huge loans given under that fund for health projects. So the idea of the Inequalities Registry is really to try and help guide those investments so that we're not investing in the countries who are doing best, we're trying to invest in the countries who are doing worst, yeah?
Absolutely. And regarding this, just for information, we are in contact with the OECD, which is working at the moment on the country profile, and we are providing and discussing with them all the information to describe how things are organized across Europe for care, for access to care, access to radiation therapy, and everything, really, because we believe this would be a really important tool to show where to improve, as you mentioned, in which country to invest. And one of the things we mentioned also in the talk that was by Delphine, the European reference networks are really important tools for the implementation of the cross-border healthcare and access to quality care across Europe. And clearly one of the key questions for us is how a member state can be really committed in supporting more this European reference network. And finally, just to share with you that we launched in SIOP Europe a new project where we wanted to see across Europe in each national cancer plan in each country, what are the information and the plan for childhood cancer, to figure out what is at the national level, the current situation of how to make progress for childhood cancer. And then it will be an important tool to show the discrepancy and to really help member states to get more committed in really addressing this common objective that we shared, all of us. So it's 2 minutes before the hour. I think we will need to stop. And thank you very much, John, for your participation. I think it was really, really great to have you on board.
I'm so happy to be in a group which is so enthusiastic and constructive. So really congratulations on your meeting. I really appreciate your comments. I don't want to dictate what you do in terms of the cancer board. You decide. I feel it's good to be in on the inside of things rather than on the outside. So that's my last piece of advice. But it's really up to you guys to decide what way you want to organize your work. And just congratulations again on all your efforts and your constructive attitude. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you very much for considering our community as a priority in terms of Europe's policies.
And we want to continue to help with a clear motto, work together. This is how we will move the lines and déplacer les montagnes, we would say in French, to cure more children, to cure them better and tackle inequalities. So we will now finish this. It's the hour. We have a final slide. I would like to thank very much Olga, Marco, and Dejan. Without them, nothing would have happened today. I would like to thank you very much, Delphine. It was great really preparing this with you, and I hope people enjoyed. And we would like to thank you and I can give you the floor for a final word as well, Delphine, please.
Well, I mean, I think you've said it all. Thank you very much for your very high attendance. I'm very happy to see that these questions, despite the fact they are administrative, dry, and maybe not so funny to listen to, are actually capturing your attention, because I really believe that those regulations can have a major impact on the future of children and young adults with cancer. So thank you very much for your attendance. Thank you so much, John, for joining us and contributing to the discussion. I think we will set a meeting with you as soon as possible to follow up on those very interesting discussions. And thank you, Gilles, for your contribution to the discussions as well. And thank you to the office for organizing this in such a flawless manner. It was perfect.
So the recording of this will be available on the SIOP Europe website as well as the slides. And clearly, I would like to thank you all for your participation, for your attendance, for all the messages, and keep this, take this, and move this forward in all your environment at the regional, national, European level, because we're working all together, we will be stronger and achieve the goal for the sake of children and adolescents with cancer. Thank you very much. Have a very good day. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.